I'm relying on you.
Hi, I'm Mary Maudsley Scruggs, licensed marriage and family therapist.
And I'm Josie Blosser, marriage and family therapy candidate.
And today we're going to talk about imposter syndrome when we're back. Okay, so you want to start it off?
Yeah, I'd love to. Okay, so we are going to talk about imposter syndrome, which I think is something that a lot of people, if not most people, experience probably at least once in their life.
At least once.
At least once.
Surely.
And it can happen in any and all settings, but I guess we should probably talk about what imposter syndrome is. So if you want the technical definition, it would be a psychological phenomenon when people doubt their accomplishments or their achievements. And oftentimes they feel like they're undeserving of the achievements or like the accolades they receive from people.
Yeah.
Would you put it in more simple terms?
When you think you don't deserve the good things that you're doing in your life or have in your life, but you really do. You've earned it.
I think a word we will probably say a lot today in this video is like, it's a word, more of a phrase of, I feel like a fraud.
Yeah, a fraud, a con artist. Yeah.
I don't actually know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it anyway.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So how would you, Mary, say that you have experienced imposter syndrome, and whether that be in your own life or especially as a therapist?
So, in lots of ways. I would say it definitely comes up more in my professional settings, like for a while, but it's funny because I hadn't ever heard of it until we were in grad school, like when I was in the thick of my imposter syndrome. And I was like, what is this? It felt like a buzzword. I was like, is this a real thing? And then I finally started looking more into it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is other people? Like, this is not just me. I feel like that's where it really started to be hard for me in my experience with imposter syndrome. Is like, okay, I'm in grad school. Was I just really great at my interviews? Or, I mean, it had to just be that, because my grades, I mean, they were good enough, right? But not that
They
great.
got you in.
Yeah, and I remember, because for those of you who may have not seen our videos before, like, you and I were in the same cohort, so we were in grad school together, but I remember us sitting there in classes, and I was just like, wow, these people are so intelligent and so amazing, and how am I sitting here with them? And it was like this weird dynamic of, I don't deserve to be here, but also, wow, I'm so honored to be here. It sounds really corny, but it was really exciting at the same time.
Yeah. I agree. I think the funny thing is, you know, like you said, we were in the same cohort. I would have never known that that's what you were experiencing. You didn't confess that. You weren't sitting there out loud doubting your worthiness of being there, and you weren't, you know, sitting there saying like, wow, you guys are so much smarter and I don't feel that. But what you didn't know is I was sitting a couple of chairs down from you or across the table from you and thinking the exact same thing of like, oh my gosh, Mary just answered that question so beautifully, and I don't think I ever would have thought of that. And I think that's kind of what imposter syndrome is. It's a very like isolating and lonely thing, and it's very internal. You don't typically tell someone, I don't think I'm worthy of being here. I don't think I'm good enough.
Yeah. Because at the same time, you do want people to think that, right? Like you do, and you're not necessarily wanting to con people, but you want to think, I do deserve to be here, and I want other people to think that because I've worked really hard to be in this position I'm in whatever situation it is. Right.
Well, and I think it's the whole like fake it till you make it. And imposter syndrome even challenges that of like, hey, we know you're faking it. Are you actually worthy of being here? Do you actually know what you're doing? But internally, I think that's the thing that keeps you going. Is like, just fake it until you make it. Like, we'll never know. We'll never know.
Gotta get through. Yeah. What are some ways that you've experienced imposter syndrome?
Oh gosh. I mean, yeah, I would say probably all throughout like my academic career, and then definitely like in grad school, and then definitely as a professional. I would say a lot of times, definitely as a therapist, I experience it because sometimes I don't have the same life experience that the people do that I work with. So something for me, I'll go ahead and say it. Like, I'm not married. I love working with couples.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that is where my imposter syndrome shows up a lot, because I think, oh gosh, like, since I'm not married, I don't have that life experience. Am I really qualified to help married people have a healthy marriage, which is really just my own self-doubt and work. But that's an example of when it shows up, and then I have to remind myself, like, they're not coming here for my own life experience. They're coming to me because they need professional help.
Yeah, it's times like that too where if I'm in a similar situation with like a client of like, man, this is harder, maybe just harder for me to relate to on a personal level because I haven't experienced that directly in my life. I also just remember in times when I'm needing some sort of guidance, sometimes I find the best questions or guidance from people who actually don't directly experience it, because their questions really come out of curiosity and there's less bias there. And so it's like sometimes I try to remember that too, where I'm like, well, maybe I'm the best man for the job because I don't have like this block happening of I'm almost relating too much to it, and I'm able to really ask good questions out of curiosity that get them thinking in the ways they need to.
Right, absolutely. So you kind of started to say something that helped you wrestle with when you're dealing with imposter syndrome, to remember that, like, actually you know what you're doing, but what are other ways that you offset that feeling of fraudulence?
So I know I've told just like people around me in the past who have had issues of self-doubt or imposter syndrome, that the fact that you're even asking these questions is a good sign, I would think, because I'm like, first of all, I don't know what I'm trying to say. You're asking a lot of questions, so you're really getting your brain thinking of like, do I deserve this? Did I earn this? And I would just guess that people who are truly trying to be con artists, they're working even harder because they're trying to convince everyone of that, but they're not asking themselves, do I deserve this? They're just like, how do I prove that I deserve this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I feel like just the fact that you're asking questions is a good sign.
Right. I think it speaks to a high level of self-awareness, of acknowledging the ability, or not the ability, the space to grow and continue to be better, and saying, hey, I don't know everything for everyone, and maybe I can improve.
Yeah.
And that is I think professionally, that's a big quality and skill to have, that will also off-put. It's just sometimes when you know how much you don't know, that can be overwhelming. I think it was Josh and I yesterday, we were talking about this video and prepping for it, and he said something along the lines of like, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, and that really feeds into that imposter syndrome. And I would say as therapists, like, we have a big task of trying to understand and know a wide variety of things. We may have our own specialties and like a niche population that we work with, but overall we have to kind of have that relatability for everyone, so we have to know a lot. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I have people that come and talk to me about things, and I'm like, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, it is true, like Josh said to you, like, the more you see, the less you know, and it's so true, and it's so humbling in a challenging but good way. Yeah. But I would say, like, something I tend to be concerned about is I'm having an ADHD moment, and I forgot what I was saying halfway through my sentence. What were you just saying?
Over. I'll take over. We were talking about how to, like, offset, and the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Yes. So, see, you helped me get back there.
Mary and Josie.
So, I love when people are able to sit back and say, I don't know the answer to your question. And that is something we kind of have to say often in our jobs. And I feel like another note added to what you were saying is people come to us for guidance. And it's like, they want us to be able to give them the answers. First of all, we can't, because that's not our job. It's not our lives. It's their lives. Right. But also, like, we don't have all the answers, and so it can feel heavy on our shoulders as clinicians sometimes of, I wish I had the answer to life, like the key things that will get you through life and have the best life, but that's just not realistic. And and sometimes it's even just sitting with clients in that of, like, they're saying, what do we do? And it's like, I don't know, what do you do? Right. Asking the question back. And I find that in my personal life too, where people just come to me as a friend, family member, or whatever, and they're like, what do I do? And I'm like, what do you do?
Well, I know for me personally, like, that's where the imposter syndrome really shows up, is like, we're working with people's lives here. And there's a lot of gravity to that. And sometimes that's where I think, like, oh my gosh, am I qualified to be helping these people? Because one thing that I say in therapy, they could take and it could change their lives, and maybe not in a huge scale, but maybe not, you know. And so that for me is probably what really like flares up that imposter syndrome, is like, I'm messing with people's lives. That's not something I take lightly. And so that's where it really shows out. Like, I can feel like the pressure of it right now. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And then that's where it's like, when I have the thought process in my head is like, okay, well, remember, like, you're, again, back to what I was saying earlier, you're asking yourself good questions, which is a good sign. Like, you're actually thinking this through. You're not overconfident, and not abusing power in that way. Because if I went to a therapist and they had an answer for every question that I had, I would be a little concerned. I'd be like, really, how do you have all these life answers? What are you doing that I'm not?
Right. And I think even the most experienced therapists, you know, I hope one day when we're old and gray and we've had countless hours of therapy, we will feel confident in what we do, but I also hope we still have the humility to allow for a little imposter syndrome to come into play.
Yeah. I remember when we were budding clinicians, like, one of the things that always stuck out to me was, like, the research can show that sometimes the newer the therapist, sometimes they do some of the best work, because again, like what I was saying earlier, you're coming out of true curiosity and asking great questions and helping people think, and not assuming.
Right. So, can imposter syndrome be diagnosed?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think it's in the DSM.
Yeah.
So then my next question would be, like, does it stem from anything? Is it a psychological phenomenon of its own? Is it related to other mental health disorders and diagnosis?
Yeah.
What do you know about it?
So what I've seen is it's really come from a wide variety of people, like people around me that sometimes I'm shocked they even experience it, or people who I'm like, yeah, I feel them on that level. They remind me of me. But I think in that video that we either added the link or will add the link probably, the TED Talk about imposter syndrome, is they say, like, the research shows it's really not tied to things you would expect, like anxiety, depression, some other stuff like that.
Right.
What have you found?
So I almost had the opposite thought, and then I watched that video and I was like, well, that makes sense, because I was almost quick to say, I think people who maybe deal with more anxiety might deal with imposter syndrome more, and maybe that is true, but I would say overall I'm not a very anxious person, but I do deal with imposter syndrome, so I can't sit there and say, like, oh, if you have anxiety, you're guaranteed to have imposter syndrome. In the same way, if you don't have anxiety, you're not going to deal with it, because I'm the example of, I don't really have anxiety other than the normal kind, and I still deal with that imposter syndrome. So yeah, I would say it can be an independent thing, and it does not discriminate from anyone. Like, anyone can experience it in any setting.
I think, and I do think something that was said in the video that I found interesting and makes sense is that there are some people who maybe experience it more or have a harder time with it. Don't completely quote me on this. Go watch the video, because I feel like I may be getting it wrong. But
we'll put the link in the description or something.
Is that people in, like, underserved communities, or maybe in more minority groups have, like, more experience it more often, possibly. And then that's where it even gets me thinking, like, as women who have, like we got our master's degree and we're in this profession, maybe that has played a part for us of experiencing it. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think something in that video that was talking about, like, the minority groups is a lot of times them not feeling like they have a place. Which kind of ties exactly back to what you were saying of, like, when you were sitting in class and thinking, like, I don't deserve to be here, like, this space isn't created for you. But I can't speak for the rest of our cohort, but I would imagine we all experience that thought and feeling of like, I don't belong here and I'm not qualified to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We just weren't sharing it with one another, which would be so interesting if we did, because in turn we would create a space where that fear and self-doubt could sit and be present.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think especially with like minority groups and like underserved populations, or just not feeling like they have a place where they can belong and be advocated for and advocate for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, if you just think contextually, of course, sometimes that's got to play a part, surely, right? Something I was thinking about is I have this weird, I think paradoxical is the right word, thought process going on where sometimes when I catch myself, and I'm going back a little bit to what I was saying earlier, but sometimes when I catch myself experiencing imposter syndrome, I'm like, okay, Mary, actually you're giving yourself too much credit, because you are thinking you're so good at conning that you were good enough to convince people that you belong here. And so in some ways I find that helps me too, where it's like, oh, you're right, like I did the work to get here, but I'm really not that great.
You are that great.
But in a different way. I'm great in the way that I want to be. Right. I don't really want to be a con artist. Some do.
So what you're saying is like you're naturally a good person and you have good intentions for other people. In some ways. You're a good person. So at least when you're being a therapist, you're not trying to do harm to anyone. Like ethically, we're not allowed to, but as a whole, like you're a good person, so you're not intentionally going to be fraudulent.
Yeah, and I have said this to people around me in the past of just like, I think you might be giving yourself too much credit, and they're like, what? Like you're kind of almost saying exactly what my doubt is, and it's like, but hold on, like let's think this through. Maybe it kind of gives you some release. Even just being able to call it imposter syndrome, like we talk about a lot, I think, as therapists, is like when you just label it what it is, it takes a little bit of the pressure off of you. And it's like, okay, this is not me. This doubt does not define me. It is something I'm experiencing. It is a phenomenon that I'm experiencing. And once you name it, it's like, okay, I can let that
put it away. I laugh because I'm in my head. I'm thinking like, I'm pretty sure I was told this week, like, Josie, you're not the only therapist in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And so there was this like feeling of like self-importance, and I think that self-importance was trying to like off-put something else, and just a good reminder of like, we give ourselves a little bit too much credit sometimes.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like this weird balance of like, I should be confident, but I also need to be humble. And so how are we balancing that? And sometimes I think we overcorrect, and imposter syndrome is probably one of those ways we overcorrect. And it's like, okay, I don't need to go that far.
It's a fine line to walk where we're confidently humble.
Yeah, confidently humble. Yeah.
Isn't that like contradicting?
But it works, right? Whatever works.
I laugh at, we legally, ethically have to display ethically, we have to display our license once we have them. So like, I don't have a license to display right now. You do. But in my office, I have my diplomas. So we're in my office right now and you guys can't see it, but right over here is my master's degree and my bachelor degree diplomas. And that was like the first thing I hung up in my office, because it is what I needed to have that like self-esteem and boost. And I'm so looking forward to having my license hanging up there alongside them and like my specializations, because I think that's going to be the thing. As cheesy as it may be, that's what I will look at when I'm really dealing with that doubt, to be like, oh no, there's like some hard evidence,
physical evidence.
Now I don't think an education automatically makes someone a great therapist, but at least I know I've done the work.
And like that's something else to apply to just in personal life. If we're feeling some imposter syndrome, like what are ways that we can look around and be like, this is evidence that I am succeeding and things like that. And it's not always easy to find that physical evidence, but how do we look around and figure out what that could be?
Well, I don't know if you say this, but so many times I tell people like, you're here in therapy.
I say that like, so often.
I'm not doing anything, I'm not doing enough. I'm like, but you're here. And so that is something.
Even for like, it's like you guys are showing up for each other. If there's anything I could throw you, it's that you are sitting here.
Right. So I think, we've really obviously talked about like how we as therapists handle it, because one, as if you guys learn anything from our videos, I hope it's that you see like we're human before we're therapists. And so the same things anyone who'd go to therapy 4, we are probably right there with you, struggling with it. Maybe not so specifically, but we are human. We have our feelings and our flaws, and so we talk about it as therapists. But what would you advise to anyone else in a different profession or setting who's dealing with imposter syndrome and maybe they aren't aware of what it is?
I'm like, how do I not repeat myself?
Because right, I think that might have been a double question.
Well, no, but it's good. I mean, again, it's like, let's just start from the beginning. First of all, you're asking yourself the right questions. You're asking yourself questions. Like, you can find some solace in that. 2, once you can realize, I'm asking questions because I care. Like, I'm nervous about this because I care. I have a passion for my field, for this subject, whatever it is. And so it's like maybe just giving yourself some grace in that way of like, okay, like nervousness has a place. It's a feeling that exists for a reason. Like we've talked about in school a lot. We talk about eustress and distress, and maybe that's another.
Look at you using those school terms.
Yeah, they come up every so often because I'm not an imposter.
That's right. You did the training.
But which this could be a whole other episode because that would be a good one to talk about. But stress is there for a reason. It doesn't have to be so distressful, but there is a place for it. And sometimes I think we forget that stress is there for a reason. And maybe just again, like I'm a visual person, so in my head I have words popping up. Yeah. It's like, okay, stress is there for a reason. I'm doubting myself because I want to be humble and confident. This is called imposter syndrome. Here is the experience. Let me put it away. And it'll come back, but I'm going to remember I can wrap it up and put it away.
Right. Yeah.
And beautiful. I feel like I can apply that to everything. There you go.
Yeah.
Life's answers right there in the show.
Wrap it up, put it away. We won't even be back.
We do have just a few minutes left, too.
Okay. So, with our last few minutes, someone asked me this, Josh. By someone, I mean Josh. He said, do you have the opposite experience of imposter syndrome where you're, like, overly confident about something? Is there an area in your life where you're like, man, I know I can do this well and I never fail, and you will not convince me otherwise that I cannot fail? I
love when I feel that sometimes.
It's kind of
it's like, oh, for once. Yeah. But, again, there's a place for all feelings, and humility is one of them. Right. I think that's kind of like if my bias is showing up. I can feel overconfident in maybe something I often feel passionate about, whether it's like an advocacy issue or something that's similar to my personal life. And so I can find that overconfidence coming up in those times where I'm like, oh, I know this, I got it. But really, it's someone else's life. Right. And it's not going to be 100% the same experience as mine. Right. And it can create that block, like I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
What about for you?
I agree. I definitely think where it shows up, where the opposite of imposter syndrome, where I'm like, yeah, I'm solid on this one. You don't even have to tell me what to do. Is areas that I find great pride in. So for me, this is going to sound so silly, but it's in the kitchen.
You are a good baker.
I am a good baker. I can make a pie, and I feel pretty confident. Like, you can give me a recipe, and I may not feel the most confident about it, but I am the most confident in my ability to cook, and so it may not be exactly what it's supposed to be, but I probably have put something together that tastes pretty good. So that is where imposter syndrome has no place in my life, is when I'm in the kitchen with my little apron on.
That's a fun one.
It's a fun one. It's a good one. And it's one that I don't feel too bad about.
Are you willing to hear feedback if people are like,
ooh,
you could add some more salt here?
That could be the problem. No, I'm not serving any salt. There's no condiments. Like, you're going to eat it the way it is because I know it's that good.
And if you don't like it,
it's you problem.
Okay.
So come have dinner with me soon. It'll be really good, I promise.
I mean, I don't know that I've had a bad dish of yours, but
Thank you. You're just feeding into that.
I do have one last minute question that is a little off subject, but I'm just like curious what you think about it. Do you feel like imposter syndrome is something we're seeing more of?
I would say yes.
Okay.
I don't even feel like I have to think on that one too quick or too much, but my quick answer would be yes, because I think because of technology and specifically social media, which we thank you for being here, probably on social media pages.
All in balance, right?
All in balance, but there is a huge, because of social media and like the highlight reel of life, there's a big tendency to compare.
Even in dark moments, like, oh, if I'm sad, should I start recording myself and post that?
Oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, it's all in all the ways.
And I kind of think we sit there and say, like, well, this is how it should be done, or things like that. So that's where I would say I feel like it could be a bit more prevalent.
Yeah, there's a lot more things to compare yourself to. Yeah. I also am, this is not based on anything, this is me hypothesizing.
There you go.
Just to clarify. I wonder too if it's because of like more access to information and education. Like the more that people are able to get higher education, the more or not even just education, like jobs or whatever.
Yeah, experience.
Contextually, I just kind of wonder, like, is that part of the reason too we come up because we're like, wow, everyone around me is so smart. Like,
right, and they know so many things and can do so many things.
Yes, yeah.
That's a really great hypothesis.
It's just a guess.
Well, I like it.
I could be totally wrong.
Do some research on that one.
Because I'm confident and I'm humble.
There you go. Okay, well, with that, we are going to confidently and humbly end this video.
Yes, thank you for being here. You, I'm sure, are having a great time watching us.
We hope so. Always feel free to give us feedback, leave questions, leave comments.
Josie maybe can't handle the feedback, but I
be
can translate.
gentle. I have a fragile heart, i.e. a confident, egotistical heart. But if you enjoyed it so much, we're going to tell you to come back the next first Friday of the month to hear us talk about more. See, here's our self-importance. We think people want to hear what we're talking about on video.
Honestly, though, we have fun hearing ourselves.
We do have fun.
And I'm pretty sure Josh enjoys hearing us talk too. So we've got one audience member, I'm sure.
We're good to go.
Yeah.
That's all we need. That's the humility. So please come back and join our video next month. But in the meantime, always come back at 12:30 on Fridays to watch Josh and Carrie with the therapist stake, and then Hannah
with Counseling Corner.
Hannah Corner. I can never get it right. Sorry, Hannah.
The counseling spot, Counseling Corner.
Kids counseling, something like that. So, Counseling Corner, we would love to have you watch, and if you enjoy it, make sure you share it with your friends and family.
And if you don't enjoy it,
keep it to yourself.